Hi guys, this is day 5. On our notes, I broke this lesson up into 2 days, so you'll have 2 lessons this week, day 5 and day 6. Today we're going to learn about the unit circle. Okay, there's an example of the unit circle over here on the right hand side of the notes page. And a unit circle, when they tell you you're working with a unit circle, you're working with a circle of radius 1. In the last lesson, we worked with making rotational angles and triangles with the x-axis with different sized radius. When they tell you it's a unit circle, they're giving you the hint the radius is 1. So that's the most important thing. And you should have noticed on the last examples and the last assignments that the radius is a point from the center to the outside edge, center to the outside edge, right? It's always going to be a hypotenuse in your triangle that you form with the x-axis and the reference angle. In this case right here, this would be your reference angle, okay? For this triangle here, this is your right angle there. So when they say unit circle, your hypotenuse is going to be 1 and the radius of a circle is going to be 1. That's the only difference we're having today. Everything else is going to be a little bit the same. We are going to use coordinates a little more now, but coordinates are x and y values, and we should be able to figure that out. So in our first exercise, they're saying point M is located in the second quadrant on the unit circle. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw my x and y axis nice and big because we're going to have to do work in it. I'm going to draw the circle. Okay, and they say that my point M is located in the second quadrant. So point M is going to be on the unit circle. Okay, and we draw the terminal side of our angle because we're actually talking about this angle right here. Draw the terminal side of the angle from the center to point M, and we can form a triangle doing that. Okay, so that's what our triangle is going to look like. The key thing here is that because this is a unit circle, and they tell you that in right here, when they tell you it's a unit circle, you know that the radius of the circle is 1, or the hypotenuse has a value of 1. So I'm going to label 1 for the hypotenuse there. Okay? And point M has a value t and 2/3. So this point M on the circle is t and 2/3. Now we know that when we have a coordinate point, the first value is an x value and the second value is a y value. Okay? So when I'm plotting point M, I go from the center leftwards value of t. Okay? Now, when I move that direction on the x-axis, this is going to be negative. So even if I do my calculations over here and I get a positive number, I need to make this number negative to solve the problem to get the x value. That's what I'm being asked to find here. That's going to be a negative number. The y value is the distance I travel from the x-axis up or down. We are going up to the value 2/3, so that would be a positive 2/3 because we went up. Okay, so we have the t value, which is going to be negative, and a 2/3. Now, looking at what I just have your basic right triangle, like all the other problems we were doing, and now they're asking me to determine the value of t. Well, we can do that quickly with the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. My legs are t and 2/3, so t squared plus 2/3 squared equals, now c is the hypotenuse, that's 1 squared. All right, squaring this, t squared stays the same. When you square a fraction, you square the numerator and you square the denominator. And 1 squared is 1. So this becomes t squared plus 4/9 equals 1. To solve for t, I'm going to subtract the 4/9. Now, I'm going to let my calculator do that fraction for me. 1 minus fraction 4/9. 1 minus fraction 4/9. And I get 5/9 as a result. So I'm going to go over here with my work. So t squared equals 5/9. Okay? To undo this t squared, I have to take the square root of both sides. Square root, So t is going to be, now when I take the square root of the fraction, I take the square root of the numerator and I take the square root of the denominator. So t equals square root of 5 does not simplify, but the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, so I have t equals rad 5 over 3, and I'm going back over to my picture, and I know that that should be negative because we traveled from the origin in the negative direction on the x-axis, so t is going to be negative rad 5 over 3. And that's going to be my final answer I solved for t. Okay. Let's do another one like that. So, in the next one, get situated. In the next one, we have point B located in the 4th quadrant on the unit circle. So remember, the unit circle tells me the radius is 1, and I also need to put my point in the 4th quadrant. So let's draw a really big picture. Okay. Unit circle, so I'm talking about a circle, so draw a nice big circle. Okay. Now, point B is located in the 4th quadrant, so this is the 4th quadrant down here. So I'm going to put point B in here somewhere on the circle and label it 3 over 5 comma t. And I'm going to draw a line from the origin to my point B. Okay, this is the total angle here, this big giant angle, but my reference angle goes from that terminal side to the x-axis, and I can draw in my triangle like that. Oh, sorry, I bumped the thing. Okay, so I have my right triangle in quadrant 4, and they tell me that point B is 3, 5, and t. Well, we know that the 3 over 5 corresponds to x, and the t corresponds to y, because it's the positions they're in. So when I start at the origin and travel in x, I'm going this direction. I'm going in the positive x direction. That's a positive 3, 5. So I can label my triangle on that side 3/5. Once I get to this value, I have to travel up and down in y. So I am going down, right, to get to point B. This is side t, but I know whatever I solve for, because I'm going down, it is going to need to be a negative number. So t is going to be negative. So whatever I get in my algebra, I'm going to have to make it negative for t. So I also know that this is a unit circle and the radius is 1. I'm going to highlight my triangle. I like looking at it. Okay, there's my triangle. So in my unit circle, my radius is 1. So this is a point from the center to on the circle. So that is a radius, and that has a value 1. So the radius is 1, or the hypotenuse of this triangle is 1. Let's use the Pythagorean theorem and solve for this value t. So leg squared would be 3/5 is one of my legs, plus t is the other leg squared, equals the radius, which is 1 squared. That's the hypotenuse. Okay, when you square a fraction, you square the top and the bottom. 3 squared is 9. 5 squared is 25. Plus t squared equals 1 squared is 1. Now, to solve for t, I have to subtract the 9 over 25 from both sides. All right, I'm doing 1 minus 9 over 25. I'm going to let the calculator do that for me. 1 minus fraction 9 over 25. And I get 16 over 25 as a result. All right, so over here, that cancels with that. T squared equals 16 over 25. Now, to solve for t here, I have to take the square root of both sides. I'm going to move my work over here. So the square root of t squared is just t. And the square root of 16 over 25, you would do the square root of 16 in the numerator and the square root of 25 in the denominator. And both of those simplify nicely. So t, the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 25 is 5. And you could, of course, use a calculator to do each one of those things. All right, so my answer is t equals 4 over 5. Now, looking back to my picture, I know that I went down the value of t in the y direction. That would have to be negative, so I'm just going to change my final answer to negative. So t would be a negative 4 over 5. And that answers that question. Right? So we're just working with the radius of 1 on these. let's look at a different way they can ask the question. So, in this one, the terminal side of angle theta, an angle in standard position, intersects the unit circle at a point P with these coordinates. What is the value of secant? Okay, well, let's go back to our trig functions real quick because we have to worry about what secant is, right? If I use SOHCAHTOA, okay, secant is a reciprocal function of cosine. Okay, so if I can find the cosine, I can just flip the fraction to get the secant. All right, let's go ahead and see what that means in the progress of this picture. So they're telling me it's a unit circle, so I know that the radius of the unit circle is 1. So the unit circle has a radius of 1, so I'm going to draw the picture, nice big picture, and with a big circle. Okay, now the terminal side of the angle in standard position intersects the unit circle at this point. Now let's figure out this point. The point P is -1/3. Well, that's my x. That's how I travel in x direction, and that's how I travel in the y direction. So starting in the origin, traveling in the x direction, I go over -1/3 to some point, right? And I would go down negative number, rad 8/3. So my point P is going to fall in quadrant 3 on the unit circle, and it is the value -1/3 for the x coordinate and negative rad 8/3 for the y coordinate. Right? So drawing my line from the center to the point P on the circle, okay, this creates my angle theta here, my reference angle here, and I can draw the right angle side there. So I've made my right triangle in, I'm sorry about that, I keep bumping that. I can make my right triangle there. Now how do I label the sides of that right triangle? Well, remember, when you have a point P, this is the x one and this is the y one. Traveling in the x direction would be -1/3, so this is the x direction, so this side of the triangle is -1/3. And traveling in the y direction is negative rad 8/3, so that's this side right here, rad 8/3. So I have two sides, and I also know that the radius is 1 because it's a unit circle. All right, so I have my right triangle inside the circle here. Now, back to what we were asked to answer. What is the value of secant of theta? Let's go ahead and find the cosine of theta and then flip that fraction because secant is a reciprocal of cosine. So I'm going to have to label my triangle, opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Here's my reference angle. Opposite side is over across, adjacent side is next to, and my hypotenuse is the 1. Okay, so cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse. So the cosine of my angle is A/h, that's -1/3 over h of 1. Well, that's anything over 1, you can write it just as itself. So -1/3 for the cosine. Now, I'm going to flip that fraction over because secant is the reciprocal of cosine, okay? So the secant of my angle is, flip that over, -3/1, or the secant of theta is just -3. That's an answer choice here in the multiple choice, so we can circle 1 here. Okay, last example for our video today. Using the unit circle to the right, explain why the cosecant of theta equals 1/y. All right, let's look at this circle here. So we have an angle, we have this radius drawn in the 4th quadrant, okay? Here's our point xy. Do the same thing we've done in the past. I'm going to take a line from my point up to the x-axis and make the right triangle with the reference angle there, okay? So the reference angle is touching the x-axis. I'm going to label my hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. So across from this, that's my opposite side. Next to this, that's my adjacent side. And across from the right angle, that's my hypotenuse. The key here is because they said in the example here, in the text, that you have a unit circle, you know that your radius is equal to 1. So we know the hypotenuse of that triangle. So in our triangle example here, I know that the hypotenuse is 1. All right, and I have a right triangle. I like to highlight my triangle because I like to see it. Okay, so there's my triangle. Now, the next thing I have to do with this is I need to get to cosecant. Well, let me go ahead and write my SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. All right, now cosecant is a reciprocal with sine. So if sine is O over H, if I can find the sine, I can flip that to get the cosecant. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's find the sine. So the sine of our angle, and I'm going to go get the O over the H. Now looking at my picture here, okay, we got to do one more thing with it. We don't have number values for the A or the O side, but we can do is say in general terms. When I travel from 0 to this point here, I'm traveling in X. So I could generically call that side of the triangle the X value, okay? And it's a positive X value. When I travel from here down, I'm traveling a Y value, okay? So leaving that in the general term, the X and Y values on the triangle, we can see that this point is labeled XY, and that matches, okay? So the sine of our angle is created by the opposite over the hypotenuse there we go, sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite side would be our Y value, and hypotenuse is 1. So the sine would be Y over 1. Okay? If I know the resine, you could say cosecant of theta is the reciprocal of sine theta. So the cosecant of theta is 1 over y, and that's what we were asked to do. All right, so those are the end of the notes for today. I think they're going to run a little around 15 to 20 minutes every day, and I apologize for that, but I am breaking them down into some smaller chunks. But here's your notes, and then on the next page in the notes, if you printed it out, are the practice problems. So I gave you 3 practice problems that match what we did in the notes today, and then you can upload photos of this page only showing me that you did the work in Google Classroom under the assignment, or you can just email a picture of this one page to me. That's fine with me also. I'll take it either way. If you have any questions, I'm willing to set up a Zoom meeting with you, and I can go over it a little more with you. We're kind of finishing off this unit, or this part of the unit this week with these triangles and stuff, and we're going to start something different next week. So if you have any questions up till now, feel free to contact me, because I am here for you and I will help you, and I will post the answer. I'll actually post the answers to this homework assignment as well, so you can check your progress as you go along. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.